I'm Max Sterling, welcome to LarpMix. If you haven't seen part 1 of this build, I suggest checking the description below and watching part 1 of this build first. If you have seen part 1, then let's go ahead and get started on finishing up this Hammershot and checking out the final product. Let's start by addressing this. What did I do to this chamber here? Well, I got one of those mini Coke cans, and you can use anything you want that is that 7.5 ounce size can, or you could probably use a bigger can. And what you're going to do is, unfortunately, it's still a little bit big, so you got to cut it. And what I did was I used scissors and a razor blade to cut this to size, exactly to size. And then I just used Loctite super glue to glue it down. Now you can use whatever adhesive you like, but you're putting, you know, aluminum to plastic or metal to plastic. So whatever glue you have, that'll do that. And this seems to be holding up pretty well. Now, of course, we have this. And I've painted this, and that's what we're going to deal with right now is the paint. Now this can be set aside for now, and like I said, it's pretty self-explanatory how I did this, but you could use a beer can or whatever you want. I just sort of wanted to go with the Coca-Cola can. So we're going to set that aside for now, and now we're going to talk paint. Now, what I did was I went ahead and I primered and I spray painted this with a silver sort of spray paint that I have. Now what I did for the base layer was actually a high heat paint, which is very durable, and this is of course after you sand everything down. Now I also like to use something like carbon choke cleaner or brake parts cleaner to rub the plastic down, because what that does is takes any finish off. It accomplishes pretty much the same thing as sanding, except by using chemicals. Now, if you want to do that, just make sure you have the proper protective gear to do that. Make sure in a well-ventilated area. And then you basically just wipe it down with a microfiber cloth, because you don't want to leave little pieces of regular cloth stuck to it. Now, since we've decided this is going to be post-apocalyptic, when you do sand off some of the badges and stuff, you're going to have grooves and lines. So now if I was going to do this as, say, like a Western or a modern, I would take where all these lines are, where I sanded, and I would sand them with a much finer sandpaper until it was gone. Or you can take filler putty and you can put it in there and then smooth it out and then sand it, and that way you won't have all of these lines. Now if we were doing this for an old Western game, since most of the guns back then would have been a nickel finish, then I mean they would have been shiny, so we would be doing something closer to this hue. But because we're doing post-apocalyptic, I went ahead and I developed a darker shade. Now, I don't know how many of you have seen real weapons in real life, but generally speaking, they are one color. A pet peeve of mine is when I go to games and people have all these brightly multicolored blasters, and you know, all these little things are different colors. And I get that. I get the aesthetic. It's sort of like Borderlands and stuff, but really, one color is what these things should be. That makes it look so much more realistic. I realize that you're playing a post-apocalyptic genre or something, but I still desire to have a sense of realism in that, and having this be blues and reds and all kinds of different colors, you lose that, because you're telling me then that your character found something that looked like this and then had the paint or something and then painted it that way. I don't know, maybe sci-fi would be the one I would let slide if you're doing colors like that, but for me, and this is a personal opinion, I like to keep it simple and looking like it was something real, and then from there we do the distressing and adding to it. So we want to make this side look like this side, and also having this base on here, if this does scratch off, you know, you got this underneath, so it actually looks pretty good if you wear this down. So if I just lightly sanded this, the paint off, I would have this sort of silver underneath. So that's why I like to do a couple coats underneath, and colors that would make sense. Like I won't want to just paint this like red or hot pink or something, unless of course that's what you're going for. And every character in every game will have a little bit different dynamic, but this is what I was looking for. So let's go ahead and I'll show you how I painted this just real quick. You all know how to paint, but let me show you what I did. So I got this brushed metal paint, and this is dark gray, and then I got this black paint, and we just mixed, you know, equal amounts of both to get this dark sort of gunmetal color. And you could use just this. They also sell a black version of this, but it's pretty dark. It's actually black. This mixing the two will give us just a really dark gray. This by itself is close to this color, so it's actually pretty light. So let's go ahead and get a brush and we'll paint this real quick. Now, a lot of people are going to say, well, you should do all your external stuff before you paint, and we do still have a little bit of putty work to do on the bottom here. We got to fill in this gap, and we got to smooth this over and do some stuff. So what we're going to do, we're still going to paint this side, but then we'll come back and we'll sand this, and we'll fill this in, and when that's all dry, with the putty and everything, then we'll come back and just paint this bottom part and then reassemble, and we'll be good to go. So like I said, basically equal parts, and then we just mix the two together. You want to do this on a non-porous surface, so something like a can is good. If you do it on cardboard or wood or something, this is a water-based paint, so it'll have a tendency to seep in, and you don't really want this seeping in because you don't want to lose any of it. Now, if you use something with a smaller surface area, then you won't have it all spread out and mixed like I do, but this is what you want to get to, is this color right here. And from there, it's pretty straightforward. We're just painting. Now, one tip I will give you when you're painting like this is to get in all your crevices, unless you're going for something different. You don't want them filled in. And keep your brush strokes. Now, some of these places you got to just sort of do whatever you need to with the brush. But once everything is filled in, you want to go back over and make sure all of your brush strokes are one direction. Remember, this item came off of an assembly line. It's not bespoke. A machine made this at some point, so all these lines are going to be one direction. You don't want to have a bunch of brush strokes going different directions. Now, if you paint with something else like foam or something, then you'll have to figure it out from there. But I would suggest just using a brush, getting the paint in the places it needs to go, and then getting your strokes all in one direction. You may have to go back over it once or twice to make that happen, but the end result will be far better. Okay, and that's it for now. Now we're gonna let this dry. Now we will be painting it some more. This is just our base coat we're putting down. We're gonna put probably at least one more coat on here, maybe two, because we really want this paint to stay in place. And the thicker we put it on, the more we can kind of scratch off and stuff whenever we are adding the genre to it. And the other good thing about this paint is that it's easy cleanup. Now what we're going to do is reassemble the entire blaster, and we're going to start our putty work in here. So we'll sand this up a little bit, rough it up some because we painted over it, and then we'll go ahead and fill this with the putty, let it dry, and then we'll have to do some sanding, and then we'll start our final painting on the entire blaster, and then we can get into all the extra stuff. Now, ideally, we would do all of our painting and then clear this or shellac it or whatever we're going to do, but I'm going to put it together and then do all of that at the end. It shouldn't interfere on this particular blaster with the mechanisms very much. As long as you're not spraying the sealer directly down in any of these holes, I don't really think we're going to have a problem. Now on yours, depending on how far back you went and if you have to do everything that I'm doing, you may want to do the clear coat before you put it all back together, and then when you're all done, just touch this up in here and hit it with the clear, because this is nowhere near any of the mechanisms, and that'll keep it nice and tight for you. So what we're going to use here is Bondo plastic metal. Now there are a lot of different putties you could put in there. You could probably put some silicone caulk in there, whatever you want to do, but I'm a car guy. I do a lot of stuff with cars. This is the stuff I have laying around, and this is stuff I've used before. It's pretty easy to work with. You just want to have something that you're able to smooth it out with, and putty knife preferably, or anything of that like. Flip the cap over, push it in to open it up, and you're pretty much ready to rock. Now we got to put this thing together first. Now If you're doing like me and you cut this all the way back, I've had to make a modification here and put an extra hole right here. Now, you don't probably have to do that. You could glue it together, but I wanted to do that. That way I can put an extra bit of screw through there. Now, if you remember, I had to buy one of these because I broke this cylinder piece. Well, I just cut another piece of that to size. And if you can see, I had to grind down part of it because if not, that rotating mechanism will go through there. Now that sounds like a lot of work, and it is. And that's why I don't really suggest doing this part unless you're very comfortable with the work involved. Anyone else, you should have probably stopped with when we cut just the arm off. But if you wanted to go the whole way like this, you need to be a little bit creative. And if you run into problems like I did, you may want to make this little extra screw that will sit in there. Let's go ahead and genre this up. The easiest way to do that is with some rub and buff. I just so happen to have some right here, and it just so happens to be almost the same color as that. And I think that that's probably going to be our finished product here as far as this is concerned. Now, if you're concerned that's a little bit too bright still, you can work on it, make it darker. But we do still have our final overall effect to do on the blaster, so it's going to darken up when we do that anyhow. Don't worry too much about this part. You can finish painting it on the blaster. So I had a couple of little pre-cut pieces of plastic that I made to sort of shove down in here. And that is exactly what I'm going to do. And then this one I actually cut when the blaster was open to match all the little points inside. I could have put this in here when I was putting it together, but that would have been too easy. Okay, and so for me, that's what we got, and it's pretty solid. So when you push down on it, there shouldn't be much of an issue, and because I cut it the way I did, there's not going to be a lot of left to right movement, and that's it. Like I said, lots of different ways to tackle this. This is just how I'm doing it. Now the next step, of course, is the putty here. Alright, I'm just going to use this painter's tool, and here we go. So let's go ahead and put some on here. And if you have gloves on, of course, you can use your finger also. And we want to make sure we fill in all of these rough points. Now, like I said, if you're doing Old West or something with this, you could also use this to smooth out all those sanding marks that you have on it. To make it look a lot cleaner. And if you have high points and stuff, that's fine because you can sand this down once it dries. And this is where we're at now. So everything is reassembled. What I did was I took and I sanded this down after I let the putty dry on there. And the same with this back here. All we did was use that metal putty to fill this all in. Now, this has been giving me a little bit of trouble with the rotation here, so I think I'm going to remove this little screw that I made all together and just put like a zip tie or something in there. Since it's going to be post-apocalyptic, it's not going to matter what's in there, but I do want something holding this together up here to give it more structural integrity, because just this putty, it may start to give, and I don't want that to happen. But yeah, this is pretty much what it's looking like so far. I think it looks pretty good just as is, but we're going to do something here, and I'm going to repaint this wood grip, and that's what we're going to do right now. For the wood grip, we're just going to use a couple of different colors of brown. I got brown oxide, burnt umber, and coffee latte. And what we're going to do is just sort of mix these three, and then we're going to do some brush strokes. Now we're going to go ahead and do something about that grip right here. Now, I got this bandage around Halloween time, but they also make a tape which I used on this blaster, and I like this tape a lot better, but I ran out of it, so I'm going to go ahead and use actual, you know, basically fake gauze or fake bandage. Now you can use actual gauze or whatever you want to do, but we're going to wrap this around here. Now in order to make it look sort of like this is, we'll take it and we'll fold it over, and we're going to stretch it pretty thin, and we're just going to use Super 77 or some sort of spray adhesive to get it on there initially, and then after we shellac it again and stuff, then this will be basically become part of the blaster. So let's go ahead and do that. And once this is fully wrapped, then we can begin our genre process. Now, I did clear this before we're doing the genre stuff, and that's because we used a water-based paint. I don't want anything screwing up the undercoat. So, I mean, basically, you know, this is what we wanted to have. I mean, we had to do this portion here because it's internal, but now we can really begin the outside work. And really, it's pretty much going to be along the same lines as what we did on other blasters you've seen on this channel. Now you can decide how far into the post-apocalyptic future you are. Like I said, I mean, this may be enough. You put some dry brushing on here, some scratches, that may be it. If you want to take it a step further, you know, then we already have the can in here. We have this on there. You know, we can maybe take some chunks out, or do some other things, put some deep gouges in and really sort of get some dirt on there, or we can just really make it super filthy. But the first things I'm going to do here is we're going to do a little bit of dry brushing, and then we're going to fill in some of the low points, and we'll see what it looks like from there. I hope that you enjoyed this build. I think we took a normal Hammershot and did a pretty radical modification to it to end up with something pretty special. And let me go ahead and just give you a close-up of it here. And basically all I did was just do those washes, and I took some brown that I mixed with red and rubbed it on the weapon, and then that gave us sort of this outside patina to it, and then we hit it with some clear. I'm wearing gloves because the clear is still a little tacky. Took that screw out, put some suede string in there, and I think that that really made this look like a phenomenal blaster. And whether you're using it just as a prop or if you're using it as a functional Nerf blaster, it'll get the job done. With those internal mods we did, it hits really hard. I'm putting some Doomlands darts in here instead of the goofy green zombie strike ones because they have black tips. Now, one thing is that these do stick out a little bit here. If your game allows it, you may want to cut a 1/4 inch off the back of these darts so that they sit snug down in there, and with these black tips on there, I think it would look pretty sweet. As far as shooting goes, well, it's very strong. Everything works just as it should. And they come out much harder than a stock blaster would, and everything works just perfect. Now, I did have some issues during the build. I broke a couple things. I had to rebuild them out of metal putty and stuff. So if you do decide to go this far with it, just be prepared that you may break stuff, and if you're not confident in fixing that, then you may lose your blaster. It may end up as just a prop. So I wouldn't suggest that a novice do something like this. However, if you're able to find these on sale or at a yard sale and you get one cheap enough and you have a spare one, I'd say go for it, because if you don't take it back as far as I did, if you leave that little sort of like fuel cell thing I called it underneath, then it's going to be much easier because there's a second screw there and it'll hold the blaster together much better, and you only got to fill in a little tiny spot. With this we had to fill in a huge area. And as long as you don't break any internal components or lose anything, then it should go back together real nice. Now, I've heard people complain that with this mod, this gets a little floppy. So far, this hasn't given me any grief. Over time, maybe I could see that happening, but even if that did happen, you can buy barrels or you 3D print the cylinders and you could just put a whole new piece in there, assuming you can get this back apart, and that would fix it. And like I said, I'm really happy with how this came out, and I didn't go too wild because I like my apocalypses to be a little bit on the simple side, and to me this is pretty simple looking. Now if you wanted to add, like, you know, any sort of insignias or something, there's a big flat space on the Hammershot there to do so. I think you could tastefully add, you know, a dark colored insignia on here and have this still looking really nice. And I hope that you agree. So give it a shot if you want to, but if you break your blaster, it's not on me. That's at your own risk. And of course, if you like this video, please click like, subscribe to my channel below. If this helped you in any way, I have a Patreon and a Ko-Fi that you could donate to me. I'd love the support. It helps me make these awesome videos. And of course, as always, adventure on.